30 years ago today, I was sitting on the shores of Loch Ness, mildly stoned and waiting for inspiration to strike. And then inspiration did strike, because I thought, why don't I start up an organisation for people who are interested in mystery animals? And so I did. On July the 28th, 1996, my first marriage, which had been teetering on the brink of disaster for some time, finally fell apart, and my first wife, Alison, left me. Later on that day, I phoned my old friend Graham Inglis and asked him if he could come and keep me company, because I really didn't want to be by myself that night. And so he came over, brandishing a bottle of whiskey. We drank most of it, as far as I remember, and in the middle of the drinking the whiskey and listening to Hawkwind, I said to him that the Centre for Fortean Zoology was going to fall apart as well, because Alison had been my deputy and now she wasn't, and did he fancy being deputy director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology? And like most of my best ideas, which happen on the spur of a moment whilst in my cups, it's worked ever since. Now, Graham, what's your favourite memory from the earliest part of your tenure with the CFZ?
I think really it's playing with a lot of the then quite advanced computer software, which involved activities on the Amiga computer, and trying to get things like video cameras to interface with the computer for rudimentary video editing, which in those days was a real challenge to get it to work out of the box. It very often didn't, but it was certainly a challenge.
And then, of course, 23 years ago, I think, I can't even count. No, 24 years ago, you and I, together with the Channel 4 film crew, went to Puerto Rico. Memories of that, old friend.
Well, there were a series of challenges for me there, not least because of the humidity in Puerto Rico. The bit of the journey I liked the most was when we went to Mexico with the high desert climate. That was when I found that I really got on well with the Sonoran Desert, and going back to that desert later in Arizona, I found as equally as nice as it had been all those years ago. Whereas Puerto Rico, with its jungle type humidity, that just really wasn't for me.
And then a couple of years later, on came Richard.
Yes, I was out looking for the beast of Bodmin Moor with some friends of mine, and on a break from cat hunting and leaving out slabs of flesh on the moor with sand traps around them, we visited the sadly now defunct Potter's Museum of Curiosities at the Jamaica Inn on Bodmin Moor. And on the way out in the little shop, I found a magazine called Animals and Men, which wasn't as rude as it sounded, and I read it and I enjoyed it, and so I subscribed to it, and then I started to write letters for it, and then I started to write articles for it, and then I had some long phone conversations with John back in my student days, and he said, when you finish at university, head on down to the Centre for Fortean Zoology and become our zoological director. So I was the Yorkshire rep at first, and then I came down to join as the zoological director, and I got it into my head that John was a little bit like Lord Bath, and he was an eccentric millionaire, and the place he lived, Holm Court, was some great mansion somewhere with huge libraries and big leather back chairs and those globes of the world that you open up and they have liquor inside them, and he'd have butlers and extensive grounds. And I came down and found that Holm Court was a housing estate in in a scruffy part of Exeter, and John's fabulous mansion was a two up, two down council house that
Wasn't the council house?
it owed more to the young ones than it did to the X-Files. But since that day, when I came down to join, I've been all over the world looking for Tasmanian wolves and giant anacondas and Mongolian deathworms and yetis and orang pendeks and all manner of strange beasts. So it's been a pretty wild trip.
What a long, strange trip it's been. And then, apart from the expeditions and the research projects all over the world, we became the world's largest cryptozoological publishing house. But even before the advent of print-on-demand services like Lightning Source made that possible, we were printing books ourselves. But as Graham remembers, they were not particularly good or easy or fun times.
No, indeed. Back in those days, if you wanted fancy fonts, you had to use Letraset stick-down letters to actually compose your headings and paste photographs or bits of text onto master sheets, which could then be photocopied, run off on a photocopier, and then we'd have to manually chomp, as we called it, the holes down the side of the binding so that it could be ring bound. And it was all very primitive. It worked back then, but it was certainly very labour intensive compared to these days of print on demand.
Here's to the next 30 years, and hopefully in 30 years' time I will be long dead, and the whole thing will be being administered and looked after by computer boys. Say something, computer boy.
Hello, everybody.
Is that it?
Yes.
What about celebrating our 30th birthday?
Happy birthday? I don't know. Young people don't need to say happy birthday. We've got rap music.
Ew, that's not music.